What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of the TXMMA podcast. This is Mike and Calvin here. We're going all audio today. Calvin just came from training, and I'm not really much to look at right now anyway.
Both got a face for the radio.
Yeah, so we're just going to talk a little bit. Hopefully you can hear us okay on my little video camera. So this edition, we're talking strictly recap of Legacy Fighting Championship 44, which was held last Friday, August 28th at the Arena Theater. I wasn't there live, but I was watching the main card on Access TV. Calvin was in attendance covering it for us. So we're going to pretty much run the fights from bottom to top and, talk about them. So first fight of the night was an amateur bout with Daniel Negrete and Alden Correa. I don't know too much about these guys heading in, other than the fact that they're both debuting, so Calvin's basically going to talk about how the fight went.
So Alden's, from what I understand, a 4-ounce guy. Danny is trains out of Northside in Humble. I've trained with him a few times. Hard worker. It's his first fight. He's had a couple of fights that fell through in the past. And Alden was just a little quicker that night. He was always a step ahead on the feet. Got a takedown, and Daniel had his moments, but ended up with Alden, I believe, getting that one by an armbar. Good first fight to kick off the card, though. Good amateurs.
Now, the next one coming up was a flyweight fight with Jonathan Davis, who came into the fight 1-0, fighting a guy that we've seen a couple of times around the Texas Regional Amateur Circuit, Victor Lomax. How'd that fight go?
So if I recall right, Jonathan is a 17-year-old. He's Jeremy Mahan's almost personal project out of 4-ounce, and there's no way to put it. He was just better. He was better on the feet. He was better on the ground, and got him out of there pretty quick by decision. The first few fights on the card were over pretty shortly. The first intermission of the night was early on.
Now, two more amateur fights to conclude that portion of the Legacy 44 prelims. Chris Lopez against Eric Brazier. Solis, 1-0. Chris Solis heading in. Eric Brazier, 1-3. How'd that fight end up?
The Chris Solis and Eric Brazier fight, Chris Solis took it. Competitive fight while it lasted. He got down, he got a rear naked choke at the end of the round, and if he'd have held on for, I don't know, it was within 10 seconds. If he'd have held on, he'd have got out of it. But when you're caught, you know you're caught, especially as an amateur. You got to tap. He did. But very competitive fight. And they went out there and got down to business, and it was fun.
Now, last amateur fight of the night, somewhat of a really popular person around the Houston MMA scene, training out of 4-ounce, B. Wynn, taking on a fighter out of, I don't know where she's from. I don't know where Denise is
California, from
Denise
what I heard.
Bruckner. Tell me about these fighters.
So Denise, from what I hear, she came all the way from California with a 1-2 record to fight B. I think
Which is good. B normally has a hard time getting fights.
Yeah, she does. I think everybody in Houston is aware of her. So B went out there for the first couple of rounds, and she did what she did. She better Muay Thai. She beat her up. Gotten a couple of spots that she worked her way out of, but she hands down won the first 2 rounds. She got in some trouble. I believe it was the 3rd round. She found herself in a pretty deep guillotine choke that she was patient. She got her way out of, and
Is that standing or on the ground?
She hit it standing against the cage, and she had one on the ground too. The one on the ground, it's hard to tell from where I was sitting how deep it was, but the photos I saw, she was under the chin. So good job for B to work her way through that. Cruise to a decision. I think it was.
Well, hopefully we see her fight again soon. B actually fights both in Legacy Kickboxing and MMA, and even though this was an amateur fight, she's getting to that point in her career where she's probably considering going pro, where it might be easier for her to get fights on a regular basis. It's just a matter of when her and Bob Perez and all her coaches think she's ready. But definitely a future ahead for B. Wynn. Now, moving on to the professional portion of the card, still in the prelims, we've got a couple of really interesting fights that I really hated missing in person. Jason Langelier out of Metro Fight Club, tall guy, good protege of Saul Solis, seems to be well-rounded everywhere, was taking on Michael Lyons, who is the debut fighter as a pro. How'd that fight turn out?
Violent. Jason Langelier is listed at 6'4". Well, I'm 6'4", and Jason's an inch taller than me, and he made 160 for this fight. If he makes 55, he's going to be hell on wheels. He's just bigger
You
than
think he's going to be able to do that?
He made 60 and didn't look like it affected him. This fight went into the second round, but Jason won every second of the fight. He had the guy out at the end of the first round, and the bell saved him, but he came out and immediately threw a head kick that was blocked but still hurt, and it just went downhill for Michael Lyons from there. Props to him for even getting through the fight, and he didn't quit on it. But damn, he took a beating.
Well, after this fight, Jason's now 2-0. So he could definitely be a prospect at 55 if he makes that.
Yeah.
There is no 160 weight class, so it's either he's a welterweight or a lightweight, and it looks like he's trying to make his way down there. So we'll definitely see more from him in the future, and he's definitely a prospect to watch. The next fight up, Roberto Sanchez, training out of Draculino's Gracie Baja, Texas, down there in Webster, fighting another guy that's made a name for himself, locally here in Houston as an amateur and as a pro, Mike DeLeon.
I expected this to be a lot more competitive than it was. Mike DeLeon's a tough guy, and I've only seen Roberto Sanchez fight once. It was the legacy fight in Louisiana, and he just smoothed jiu-jitsu. The guy ran out there, pulled guard, arm barred him. I don't think he ever threw a strike, and this fight was a lot of the same. He came out, he clinched up, he threw Mike on his head, and by the time Mike even started defending, he had Roberto on his back, and it was a quick rear naked choke. So I've seen nothing out of Roberto except for jiu-jitsu, but the jiu-jitsu is incredible. I mean, he's steamrolled the last two guys, so until somebody stops him,
it's kind of funny. He's shown some more scrappiness or some more willingness to trade in his amateur fights. But you look at him fighting as a pro. I think now he's 3-0, and he's looked like an old school, gi wearing jiu-jitsu guy. I mean, in Louisiana, he straight up jumped up and pulled almost like a front. It was like jumping guard, but he hugged him immediately. He looked like a giant koala bear just attacking an arm or a neck,
but he gets it.
So
someone's gonna have to stop him.
Yeah, so at 3-0, he's definitely somebody to watch in his division over at flyweight. So it's interesting what the future has in store for him. Next up, Patrick Hutton, one of Houston's most lovable guys who continues to trot it out there, even though he's retired once. Still, strong guy, can always be a threat to knock you out or outbox you if you are going to strike with him. Taking on another guy that's, getting on a little bit up there, but has had success in MMA so far, Danny Orr out of the Lake Jackson area.
Yeah, and this fight went like most expected it to. Patrick he's a gamer. Legacy loves him because if you called him today to fight tomorrow, he'd do it. He just likes to fight. I talked to him after the fight, and he said this time he's really done with MMA. Patrick is completely different in a kickboxing fight. He'll hurt you with either hand.
Oh yeah, he's definitely top level.
But with he's got a wrestling deficiency, and when you have that, you can't just pull the trigger and throw power shots. And Danny came into this fight, my last interview for Legacy, he said he wanted to keep it on the feet, and he did for a minute and a half, and it was touch and go. And I like both guys. So
two of the nicer guys you could ever meet.
Yeah, they're both great guys, and they traded, and Patrick hit him pretty good. Danny got hit for sure. Ended up getting a double leg against the fence, softened him up, and then he sunk the rear naked in. So I think most people would have picked Danny by some kind of submission, and it went like that. But Patrick's got nothing to hang his head about. I mean, Danny has trucked everybody he's fought all the way up through the amateurs. And
he's definitely a tough guy. Former member of our nation's armed forces, and he's taken that type of never will give up, never can die attitude, into his career as a fighter, both at the amateur level where he won multiple titles, and now as a pro. Maybe at 3-0 at his weight class at middleweight, he couldn't find his way to TV at some point.
Well, it sounded like after the fight with Colin, and the interview sounded like his next fight might be on TV. So tune into Access because Danny's worth watching.
Hope so. Last fight of the prelims, another flyweight fight between Ramiro Ruiz, a 4-ounce. Drives straight up from Mexico like 3 times a week on a bus. Well, he doesn't drive, but he takes the bus from the other side of Mexico to come here and train at 4-ounce. Taking on another guy who's had some pretty good fights as a business owner locally in Houston, Mike Trent.
So with Mike's experience, I was giving him the edge in this one, and I was wrong. Ramiro, I don't know a whole lot about him. Like I say, he's not from the area. He drives up from Mexico. Or rides the bus. he looked good, looked very sharp because Mike's a tough out. And Ramiro was hands down the better guy that night. He ended up catching Mike in a guillotine, and it was a scramble, and he maintained position, but he looks good everywhere.
Where'd he catch it?
Caught it, they were trading, and he was winning on the feet. Mike shot for a guillotine, I believe it was second round or into the first. But Mike shot in for a double leg, and he got caught, and he did everything he could to defend it, and Ramiro was just a step ahead of him, ended up getting the finish. We'll see Mike again. For 40 years old, that guy is in incredible shape.
He's in incredible shape. He trains with some really good camps with Sal Solis and Opiano Malachias for his jiu-jitsu. He'll be back.
And Ramiro's a guy to watch.
I thought he was actually more of a striker, and he finishes a guy like Mike, who I believe is a purple belt level at jiu-jitsu. That's pretty impressive. Now let me ask you this, just looking in the future, since both of these fighters came out of flyweight fights at Legacy 44, how do you think a fight between Ramiro Ruiz or Roberto Sanchez would go?
If I'm going to have to see something out of Roberto other than straight jiu-jitsu, because Ramiro, he has professional level stand-up. I don't think you're just going to be able to run in on the guy like that. He uses range well, he moves well. I don't think he's going to be an easy takedown, because Mike can wrestle, and Mike shot, and he ended up getting submitted. So I think Roberto probably has the edge in jiu-jitsu, but if I'm a betting guy, I'm going to go for Ramiro.
Well, it's interesting that, Roberto Sanchez and Mike Trin both train out of Gracie Barra, so there's some continuity there if that fight does happen,
Right.
We don't know how many other options there are at 25. There's a couple of other guys in that division, so
De Leon and Trin
we'll
would be fun.
Yeah, that's another fight that makes sense. Absolutely. Moving on to the main card over on Access TV. Now, I did catch this portion of the card, so I can speak a little more to it, but we'll talk about it just like we have been. First fight, Colin Wright against Ryan Hollis. Wright out of Paradigm. He's had some bad luck as a pro, but he was a killer as an amateur.
Right.
Came out of the Amis with a great record and is looking to build that back up at the pro level. Fighting a guy that's, been... he's proven a lot of people wrong in terms of what he can do. I mean, when he was an amateur, people were kind of making fun of him like he's a tall, skinny kid. He talks a big game, but who knows if he can actually do something. And now you look at him maybe a couple of, 3 years later, he's 9-6 as a pro. How'd you see this fight turning out walking in before you saw it?
So I picked Colin last week, and I had no confidence in that decision because it could have gone either way. Luckily picked that one right. I really thought that the stand-up would be more predominant because Colin likes to trade, and Ryan will trade with anybody. He's tough as hell. And they traded a lot. The difference was Colin's wrestling. The one thing that gets Ryan is top control wrestling. Colin did a lot of it. Now, he took his shots. Ryan hit him with some hard up kicks. In fact, he cut him over the eye. And props to the state and the doctors for letting the fight go, because I've seen fights stop for much less than that cut. But the decision there wasn't a whole lot of ways to score that fight. Colin out-wrestled him, he held him down, and he got the win. If Ryan ever figures out how to escape these top control wrestlers that hold him down and they're just stronger, he's going to be held to stop.
Well, it's kind of funny because on the televised broadcast, Chavello really drew a direct comparison between Hollis and the Diaz brothers.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, they've got the same style.
Alike.
They're long fighters, and they do that. They pepper you, they punish you from afar with those punches,
right.
Volume punches. And Ryan fights the same way. Now, before the fight, I was trying to think in my head how these guys could beat each other because they're both pretty dynamic. And what I thought was if Colin could get him in a clinch and kind of make the fight not so pretty.
Yeah, just ugly and grimy.
Yeah, I thought that he would have a chance at it, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
Now, I would love for Ryan to, even though he's got 15 fights, and he does have a lot of traits that make him. He's a legit prize fighter. This dude he's born to fight. That's what he does. It would be cool to see him go to like a camp like Gracie Fighter and Lodi, Manteca area in Northern California, and really train with those other guys that are kind of like him.
Right.
And I think he could improve by leaps and bounds. He's got the attitude for it.
Yeah.
So,
And he loves to fight as much as anybody in Houston.
Like, if there's somebody willing to take a chance on this kid and sponsor him, that's exactly the type of thing I'd want him to go do, is go up there to fight. To camp with those tough guys like Diaz and Chris Quitaquit and all those guys up there.
And if he was the only fight on a card, I would tune in to watch it because he's always worth watching. I mean, he always comes to fight, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was good to see, nothing but respect from both guys for this fight. Ryan normally talks a lot of shit.
Right.
Or gets shit talked to him. So it was good to see this fight. Hate to see either of those guys lose, but, we'll look forward to seeing from both of them, and it was good to see Colin get a win and move up to 4-2. And Ryan's now at 9-7. Next fight up on the main card, welterweight, Charlie Ontiveros out of Cleveland, Texas, taking on Bilal Williams.
Oh my God!
He's out of DFW.
Yeah, he's a next generation guy, and
he's kind of looked like a point fighting fight on TV.
And that's what it was. And Charlie threw a lot of flashy stuff that really didn't do any damage. The only things worth mentioning in the fight was Bilal threw a couple of overhands, and he tagged Charlie a few times. Charlie has a chin. He dropped him a few times. He definitely won the fight, and he got hometown pretty hard. The judges gave the decision to Charlie. Was not a popular decision.
You don't agree with it?
Oh, God, nobody did. And there was a lot of booing. If you were booing the judges, good on you because it was a terrible decision. If you were there live and you booed Charlie, you suck.
No, it didn't look like anybody actually got hurt in that fight, though.
No, Charlie got rocked a few times. He got dropped, and he was getting chased all over the cage. It was Charlie. He was looking to counter. Yeah, he dropped him.
With what?
Overhand right. Not almost knocked out, but he definitely took his feet out from under him. Now I will say Bilal, after he hurt him, and cracked him, instead of, hey, can I get this guy out of here, for some reason he started doing the YMCA and all kinds of other stuff with his arms and calisthenics instead of...
It's funny. That's one of the things that... Charlie's a finisher. He's fast, but I've seen him also showboat a little bit.
Yeah.
So maybe they flew into that rhythm.
Yeah, and you're feeling good when you hit somebody hard, but...
You should put him away. Put him away next time.
Charlie didn't even think he won the fight. His... post-fight interview, the first thing he said was, hey, I'll give you a rematch. So props to Charlie. When you won and lost a fight, he didn't strut around and act like he won it. He was humble. And it's not Charlie's job to score the fight. He went in there and fought and came away with
all you can do is fight, and the judges will see how they do. So with that being said, Charlie's record looks a lot better now. It's 6-3 than 5-3.
Right.
And Bilal falls to 3-2. Moving on. Next fight up, we've got...
You got the Hulk coming back after his title fight with Bronzoulis.
Yeah, Jonathan Hulk Harris taking on Ray Trujillo. Talk about guys with lots of fights. Ray's had 32 of them.
Right.
And Harris isn't far behind him at about 14 fights. Now, it's kind of funny because heading into this fight, it's kind of funny to see this specific matchup because I've seen Jonathan Harris fight as heavy as middleweight at 185 and Ray fight as low as 45.
Right.
But Ray still hits like an 85er. So I was wondering how this fight would play out at 55. Take us through it.
They both hit hard, and I really expected somebody to get knocked out, and neither one of them connected. There wasn't a whole lot of hard throwing. It was an ugly, scrappy grind, and it was pretty apparent that Jonathan is the better wrestler. I think he just got his purple belt after the fight, so congratulations, Jonathan, on that. He ground Ray down. He beat him up. Now, he took a few shots. He's sporting a pretty good black eye the next day, but 30-27 across the board, I believe, are the scores. And it came down to Jonathan's younger, he's stronger, and just a little bit better wrestler.
He utilized a little bit of his natural size. And, even though Ray bangs and he's got decent grappling, and Jonathan's always been the same type of guy, Jonathan is one of those guys that will not hesitate to take you down. He's not going to play the striking game if he thinks he has strategic advantage on the ground. So he'll try to ground and pound. So, Jonathan steps out of his fight at 10-5 and is now fighting as a lightweight. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Now I've heard talk that he wants to move down to 45.
Harris does.
That's what I've heard. Now whether that's true or not, he'd be a hell of a 45. But he's a big dude at 55, and he did what he needed to do when you're fighting somebody, even if you think you're better with the stand-up that hits as hard as Ray does. Out wrestle him.
I can't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine him at 55.
Well,
before this fight, but all these guys, man. You got guys like Harris. You got Bronzoulis. You got all these guys are fighting smaller and smaller, which is interesting because it brings up a point with the current heat brought down and the new laws passed in Arkansas and Nevada about weight cutting.
IVs and stuff.
Yeah, and California says that you can't rehydrate after weigh-ins. I mean, how the heck are they going to enforce that? I don't fucking know.
Unless they check for needle marks, but
these guys are making it. I mean, they're doing it. And like I trained with Bronzoulis, and I go to the gym with him. And he's had issues making weight a couple of times in the past, but like he's walking around naturally light all the time.
Yeah.
I think the secret is these guys are just training all the time, sweating every day. It's ridiculous, 3 times a day. But I guess if that's what you want to be a fighter, if that's what you want to do with your life, then more power to you.
Right.
So much dedication. I can't do it.
I like beer and carbs, so I'll just be a small 185.
Now coming up, next one.
They had coming up next was Sage and Rocky, and everybody was looking forward to this fight. There were already rumors floating around that with a win, Sage was headed to the UFC. Rocky stepped in short notice. 18 years Sage is elder, and he put up a fight. Sage spent most of the time glued to his back.
He looked like he had a little bit of Marcelo Garcia and like ABC 2000 whatever it was.
Yeah. So he was the better wrestler, and that's the thing that people sleep on with Sage because he has the flashy kicks and he's fast-handed. He's got some knockouts. Sage can wrestle, and he
won states with minimal training, I believe. Towards the end of his high school career.
Yeah, the kid's just an athlete, and Rocky will fight anybody. He's a warrior. He's gonna take the fight, but Sage is it's like we discussed, younger, faster. Got takedowns at will, stayed glued to his back, and he eventually got the rear naked in the second round. But hell of a show by Rocky Long. I think most people didn't expect it to get out of the first. And the big news out of that was, of course, afterwards, Sage signing the 4-fight deal with the UFC.
Yeah, debuting in October at UFC 192, right here in his hometown of Houston. Now, a lot of people, heading into that event nationally, since most people don't know Sage, he's going to get billed as this karate guy, this fitness competition, fitness model, bodybuilding kid. But, he's actually got a lot more in his martial arts background than just karate, even though he's got 27 championships. He's like the Hickson of point fighting or some shit like that. But he's actually been grappling for a long time. I've been covering grappling in this area since 2011. I remember him being a kid under Sam Hoger going to these jiu-jitsu tournaments. And, he's kept on with it. He's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. He wrestled in high school. So he's a good wrestler, as you've seen in those last few fights.
Yeah. And
he's just a phenomenal athlete. I mean, after he wins, he can do a backflip standing.
He might already be the best pure athlete in the UFC. I mean, if he's not...
That's a load, but that could be. And we're talking about a kid that doesn't even barely train. He's a full-time student at A&M. He's probably grappling and beating all these guys without punching because he doesn't want to show up to class with a black eye or,
Oh my God! If I was that
something like that,
I wouldn't want to get punched. Just good genetics. I've had 3 ways, and neither one of the girls was as pretty as Sage.
That's funny.
So, but Sage, congratulations, man! You deserve it.
He's in that thing. So I mean, okay. So to get into Houston, and we talked about a rumor earlier that his first opponent. We were already speculating who could be. I'm hearing the name Frank Trevino.
Frank Trevino,
and he's also a guy that's been 170 and can fight at 55 and make weight.
Right.
And Sage can do that too.
So that is interesting in the fact that Sage, nobody's going to call Sage a great Muay Thai practitioner. He's flashy, he's fast. Frank Trevino has Muay Thai. So if they mix it up on the feet, I don't know who wins that one.
Sage has good wrestling. Frank has a good clinch, and he has good wrestling too.
So that's a great first fight, and it's going to answer a lot of questions because everybody's on the internet, and the talk is going around that when is Sage going to fight a top caliber guy? There's nobody but top caliber guys in the UFC, so he's got his work cut out for him. We're going to see where
he's right into the fire. He's 19 years old. and he's not fighting bums anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody has been saying for the longest time, when is Sage going to get a real opponent? When is he going to get a real opponent?
He's got one.
Well, he's got nothing but real opponents coming from.
And if he beats Frank Trevino, I will take over driving the Sage Northcutt bus.
No, we heard that rumor, but how possible is that matchup?
It makes sense. It's two guys from Houston fighting in Houston. Frank's a guy that there's not a big experience gap in the UFC between them. I think Frank has 2 fights. So it's very possible, and it sounds like it could be happening, but regardless of who he fights, it's going to be a big step up in competition, and Sage gets every opportunity to shut the naysayers up.
Good deal. Well, 2 more fights to wrap up this podcast. Co-main event of the evening, we've got Justin Risberg, 9-4 out of Houston, taking on Carrington Banks, one of the Blackzilians, undefeated at 3-0 heading into this bout. We saw what happened. Carrington,
Better wrestler.
He's got wrestling accolades. I think he was an NCAA champion or maybe Division II or something.
Right.
He pretty much out-wrestled Justin, even though Justin cracked him in the second round. What did you think of that sequence?
So, since I picked Justin, and this was the one fight on the whole card that I didn't get wrong, so I'll miss everything from here on out, I got real excited on that one because that was a nice 2-piece with a switch kick right to the chops. So, Carrington's got a chin to take that and walk through it, and then he got to take down. So, Carrington was just the better wrestler. It showed throughout the fight. I mean, Justin's tough. He's not going anywhere. If you're going to put him out, it's going to take something special. And Carrington didn't have it that night, but he cruised to a decision on his wrestling and stays undefeated.
Yeah, and I thought this really sucked, this loss for Justin, because I've seen him. This is his second big opportunity now. The first time when he fought the other UFC vet, I forget his name, but. He was doing really good. I thought he had a chance to win that fight until he hurt his ankle. Yeah. And then this time he runs into Carrington, who just happens to have takedown game. He almost had him.
Yeah.
He almost had him, but then
And he was coming off a lot of steam because he got the big win over Jared Chafee, and it's a tough win.
Tough win.
But he'll be back. He's training out of 4 ounce. He's
9-5, so he just has to string together maybe 2 or 3 good solid wins, and he's back at the door again.
At the door, right?
So we'll see. Speaking about the door, and the door pretty much opening for a Blackzilian, big monster, Valdir Arujau against Alex Morano. That door was open for him to walk through for 2.5 rounds, and Alex pretty much slammed it right on his nose.
So, Alex, if he's not on the UFC's radar, they're stupid. I can only see 2 fights after this: going to the UFC. Or fighting Derek Krantz to see who goes to the UFC. Alex was in trouble this whole fight. BB Monster was just better. He was out wrestling him. He had him everywhere. Alex was in big trouble. He knew he had to get the finish, and he hit him as hard as I've ever seen another human hit. In fact, I'm starting to GoFundMe for Alex because word on the street is Glenn Robinson filed charges for property damage after Alex knocked his guy out.
Did you see him treat Baby Monster's nose like an amusement park game?
Yeah.
For that last one?
And then the hammer fist. Alex is such
It was that hammer fist that I'm talking about.
Alex is such a nice guy backstage, but God, he's mean in the cage. I mean, he smashed him.
They call him Baby Fedor.
Yeah, and watching him warm up backstage, I know I don't want to get hit by him, but that was a home run shot. He connected on it, so...
He's 11-3 now. And like you said, the 2 probabilities for Alex at this point are to fight Krantz, who's the current welterweight champion, or go to the UFC. And, he should be on the radar.
Yeah.
So, that's it. Next up for Legacy is Legacy 45. I believe that's taking place out in Oklahoma City. Or actually, no, it's at the Hard Rock Hotel in Mississippi.
Oh, grudge match between Andrew Todd Hunter and Dylan Smith. They have talked so much trash on Facebook.
So much trash about weight and everything.
Y'all better fight. If one of y'all backs out...
Yeah, that needs to happen. That's the main event of Legacy 45, taking place at the Hard Rock Hotel in Tulsa, Oklahoma, actually on September 11th. Yeah. And then Legacy 46 is out in October in Dallas. And featuring the return of Rafael Lovato Jr., taking on a hometown hero out of Dallas, Charles Bird. So lots more good stuff coming out of Legacy. Once again, another great show at 44, and we'll talk about them next time they come up, and we'll see you next time. Until the next podcast, this is Mike and Calvin. Thanks for listening, and have a good day.